Welcome to the Making Space For podcast, where we embark on a journey to simplify, organize, and prioritize our lives. I'm your host, Paige Rabin, and on each episode, we'll explore the art of intentional living, helping you make room for what truly matters. In a world filled with constant noise and distractions, it's easy to find ourselves surrounded by things that don't contribute to our happiness or well-being. Making Space For is your guide to decluttering not just your physical space, but also your mind and soul. We'll dive into practical tips on downsizing, right-sizing, and the transformative power of letting go. Whether you're starting at a cluttered closet, pondering legacy planning, or seeking the elusive balance between work and self-care, this podcast is your sanctuary for inspiration and actionable insights. Join us as we feature experts, share personal stories, and explore the profound impact of intentional living. Together, we'll navigate this journey toward a simpler, more fulfilling life, one where you have more of what matters and less of what doesn't. Before we delve into today's episode, a quick shout out to our flagship company, A Move Handled with Care. As Denver Metro's premier senior and specialty move management expert since 2007, we've mastered the art of downsizing, right-sizing, organizing, and every step in between. From packing and moving to unpacking and staging, our experienced staff represents all stages of life, offering a compassionate touch to what matters most to you. So if you're looking to make a seamless transition while keeping what truly matters in focus, trust A Move Handled with Care. Visit us at amovehandledwithcare.com or on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn to discover the difference. Let's continue making space for the life you deserve. Welcome back to the Making Space For podcast, where we talk about planning, transitions, and the people who help families navigate life's biggest changes. Today, I'm joined by Kylee Bandy, founder of After Loss Advisors. Her work supports families in the days and months following the loss of a loved one, helping them manage the paperwork, property decisions, estate logistics, and the countless details that can feel overwhelming during grief. We're discussing what really happens after someone passes, why preparation matters, common mistakes families make, and how having the right guidance can bring clarity and peace in every tender decision. This is Making Space For After Loss. Thanks so much for coming. I'm so excited. We were just saying it's been a while since we've connected professionally. But yeah, so introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, kind of the space that you're in, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me today.
Yes.
My name's Kylee Bandy. I'm the founder of After Loss Advisors. And I started this business, several years ago, but really it started in 2018 after my dad passed away. And I was working in a different industry that was very project management, people management heavy. But after losing my dad, we were thrown into the throes of executorship, of navigating an estate, not just grieving, which we were of course doing, but now there's things we have to do. We have to take on all these tasks and transfer assets and property and deal with things. I don't want to.
Well, and I would assume just because, of your age that your dad was probably pretty young as well. So there's a lot more, I'm sure we'll get into that too, but sometimes when you're younger in life and have a lot more going on versus when you're retired and maybe have thought through that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there were some fortunate things that had happened really the year or two prior to his passing that did make things slightly easier. But my mom is still living. And so just supporting her through that, and we had to go through probate in 2 states. We had to look at businesses, website ownership, online digital assets, password management or lack thereof. There's so many things that we as humans hold in our brains about our own lives that we can manage. We can do things on a day-to-day basis, but when those aren't set out or written down very clearly in a directory type way for our people, our families, whoever's going to take care of things when we're gone or incapacitated, it makes things challenging, and in a time that is already challenging.
Right.
So
I've had several guests on that talk about little different things. We've talked about digital organizing. We've talked about estate planning and how to avoid probate and things like that. But you kind of help with the whole process.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah. I tell people, if to use analogies, think of me like your concierge for all things that have to do with after loss or preparing for what after loss would look like. I call that legacy organization. And so what I'm doing is I'm not an attorney. I'm not a financial advisor. I partner with those people. We bring in and create a team around the family or the individual who needs it. I'm serving kind of as another analogy like a project manager, a project coordinator, that person who's detail-oriented, organized, and has done this not just for myself, but now almost 100 clients to be able to say, in my experience, here's what we need to think about. Have you? What's specific to you and unique? Are you a business owner? Do you have dependents? Do you have adult dependents, pets, property, real estate? There's so many things that is unique to each individual that do need to be accounted for, and I help make sure that people don't forget anything.
Well, I love that you said 100 clients. So I'm assuming just like ours, like people are always like, oh, what's an average cost or something like that. But like, there's no average. Is there an average client? Is there an average like group of steps you have to go through? Or is it just truly that like individually and tailored to each person?
It is individual and tailored every time. There are consistencies across every client in the sense that if someone passes away, we have to get death certificates. We need to deal with Social Security. We need to do things in terms of their digital estate to make sure that there's no fraud or secure issues happening. So there are consistencies across all of us as humans that when we die, there are certain things we need to do, or as we're preparing, there are certain things that are best practice to do. But yes, as you said, every single person is so individual.
And this is something that people, not just you, like this isn't your idea, or this is, people are doing this. I noticed on your website too that you belong to like an organization of people that do this. So this is a thing.
It is. And I would say, so when my dad passed in 2018, I searched because we were so overwhelmed. I Googled all of the things I could think of like, instead of wedding planner, I Googled death planner. I Googled death project help, death executor support. And it was coming up with attorneys, which we were lucky enough to have a probate attorney supporting us. But I wanted someone who was going to get into the nitty gritty with us, that person who was going to be our partner through every step. And it didn't exist at the time. And so when I did get around to saying, okay, I've been thinking about this business for, at that point, it had been 3 years. I'm going to leave my previous career and do this full time. That was 2021, and I started Googling again, and lo and behold, there had, since my dad had passed, become a group of people who were doing this. So there's actually a organization called PALS, Professionals of After Loss Services, and it was started by several women who went through similar experiences, personal experiences of loss, wishing they had more support, and they created an organization to try to train other people on how they could be doing this work. And I was so thrilled to find them because I said, I wish that this had existed when I was looking for it, but now that this is where I want to go, thank goodness there is. So they really focus on training and education of professionals or adjacent professionals in this space to say, here's what this work can look like. It can be coaching, it can be proxy work, but they are very focused on the education, the standards, everybody's background check who's a member. So there's some real great aspects of being a member and just what they're doing in general to spread the word.
It sounds like a standard of practice, trying to build a standard of practice around this kind of new emerging idea.
Yeah.
Most people don't want to talk about death. I've had a podcast episode about funeral planning, and nobody wants to talk about it, but it's inevitable, right? Death and taxes are the two inevitable things in life. And so what do you see, or as far as people putting their head in the sand kind of idea? Like, are you getting people on the front end, or are you typically dealing with people in crisis?
Yeah, so we just talked about the professionals of after loss services. I would call this space like the after loss profession. My business name is After Loss Advisors, and so when I started, I thought I'm only going to be serving people after a death, or their families or their executors. I was really surprised to see, actually, about a year in, that my mix of working with clients before death versus after death was higher before death. So my legacy,
good on them,
which was great. That's changed now. I'm in year 3 now, and it is more after loss heavy now. But still, I have a pretty steady collection of folks who are interested, who are open, and I think the dialogue is slowly changing. But I especially think most of the time when I'm working with someone on the legacy side, they've either been an executor themselves, recently experienced the loss of someone close to them, or maybe their friend's spouse passed away and they saw what a mess it can be, and that inspires them or motivates them to say, I don't want to leave this for my family. And
I mean, that's how I get clients too, right? It's people who, their friend moved with us and they were like, oh, you need to do it. Like, we didn't use their, my kids weren't involved. It was our decision. It was our choice, and we didn't put the burden on them. And they're like, oh, okay. So it's usually that. But I guess the other question is that when you work with a family or a couple or whatever that might look like, can you do it together? Because that would probably be the most ideal. Like,
yes.
Or even after a loss, like your mom, for example, maybe she got all of her affairs in order at that point too.
Exactly. Yes. The answer to the question is Yes. I work with people however they want. I actually just worked with a client who she's in her 40s and she and her husband wanted to get organized. And she said, hey, I want to do this for myself. My ulterior motive is I want my parents to get organized as well. Would you work with all of us at the same time? I think she's like, I'm going to do it no matter what. But if I'm doing it, I think my parents will be more open to having the conversations if we do it as a team.
Yeah.
And I thought that was... She had great foresight, and I liked that she had the empathy to know that her parents might not do it on their own, but if they did it as a team. So I'm always willing to work with people for what's best for their unique situations. On the legacy side, it's very easy to work with individuals because they are there. They can tell me the things we need to know. After a loss is a little different. I need to be working with the person who has the authority over the estate to make decisions, to hire me, to share sensitive information with me. So typically that's working with the surviving spouse and or the executor, if that's not the surviving spouse, the adult children, somebody who's been granted or will be granted that legal authority to make decisions.
Yeah. I mean, it can sound a little prescriptive, and we were just talking about that a little bit before we started chatting on camera, but the human aspect of it is the stuff, the intangibles. So I guess talk through a little bit about how is that different than just hiring the probate attorney and things like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to your point, we were just talking about it. A probate attorney and attorneys in general are such a vital part of so much of what goes on here, right? The estate planning, the probate. So I never say we don't need that person. Almost always we do. They're providing the guidance of what needs to happen. In the most recent situation, actually, the family I'm currently working on, in the throes of it, their father just passed away about a week ago. There's a probate attorney. He set everything. He was their estate attorney, and now as we go into the probate world, which hopefully we'll be able to avoid, we'll see. He's really being supportive, guiding us on what needs to happen, and he's giving that guidance. But there's still the steps and the actual action that needs to happen. And more often than not, what I see in that instance is a family who feels unable to move. They're in grief. Now they have all of these tasks to do. And even though somebody's saying, here's what you need to do on a voicemail or a brief lawyer email, the family's still saying, okay, but what? What do I really need to do? And it's written there, but often grief fogs our brains. We don't know. And this is a space that none of us are often trained to do unless we're in law or a field that's so adjacent. But even then, in your own unique personal world, it still may feel overwhelming. So what I do is come in and say, here's what he or she, this attorney, told us we need to do. From my experience and with this business or with this property or with this next steps, here are the actual steps we need to take. If we still have questions, let's write them down and send them back a brief email so we're not getting charged too much on their hourly retainer. But I'm helping to kind of coach through that time and say, here's what we need to do. Kind
of deciphering the big picture from the task from the big picture that can seem very overwhelming.
Yeah, exactly. So if it's, hey, there's a beneficiary deed on this property and it's going to transfer to your name and you just need to wait for the death certificate. Okay, great. Let me kind of describe what this actually means.
Yeah.
It means what it says, and we can't do anything until we get the death certificate because that's the legal document that's going to allow us to make all of the changes with the property itself, with the adjacent bank accounts to transfer the property into this person's name. And that's, the attorney has said that in a way, but
in legal jargon.
In legal jargon, or in a way that maybe, and that's not all attorneys. Some are more descriptive than others, but in a way that we can say, here's what this really means for us right now. We're in a waiting place, and that's okay. And I think just people hearing, that's okay. We don't need to, Dad passed away 3 days ago. I need to do something now. We have time. I try to help people tackle those things that they're losing sleep over as fast as possible because I know from our experience, the thing that we were losing sleep over was not a hard thing to fix. And so sometimes it's just, what is this biggest problem? Let's take care of that first as fast as we can. But to go back to your original question and working with advisors, if it's a financial account or, hey, I have an IRA that says I have to take required minimum distributions, my job, what I say to people, is to be aware of all of these things, to know, this is probably going to come up. Here's what this means, and let's consult with your financial advisor or your attorney to see what this means specifically for you in your scenario, because I'm not in a place to give that guidance, but I can help explain what I believe it to mean, and then let's get that guidance from that other person.
Do you have to work with people just here in Colorado, or is it something that you can do across states?
Great question. So again, because I'm not the person providing any legal or financial advice, I do work with folks nationally, and we're bringing in that team depending on the state or even the county that they're in. California, for example, I worked with someone, it's very regionally specific, so worked with an attorney who was conveniently blocks away from where the father had passed away. But yeah, nationally, and that looks different, of course. When I'm here locally, I can be hands-on, in person, in a home, looking through filing cabinets with a client. So it's a different experience.
Sure.
But when I am working with folks in other states, it's typically we're meeting virtually, we're creating task lists together, we're working in an online portal, whether that be with a surviving spouse or maybe they have an adult child supporting, to say, here are the tasks we need to do. We're staying really organized on who's doing what are next steps, follow-ups. I'm often doing a lot of research for that person of, here is what your state says
requires.
Requires. Here's the things that we may need to be aware of that can come up. Your attorney can confirm this for us.
Is there a typical time frame after someone passes away that you're dealing with that? And I know, again, the nuances and specifics of a person can dictate that. But is it, I mean, are people looking at years? Are they looking at months? Are they looking at weeks? What is a typical time to get things in
That's
their
a great
ducks in a row?
question. The current going average, if you read about it online, is that the average estate takes anywhere from 12 to 18 months to settle. I've seen some that are far less. I've seen some that go on. So
it seems like a really long time.
It is. For my personal experience, my dad's estate did take 18 months to settle.
Wow.
And part of that was we did have to file probate in 2 different states. So we were in Colorado and Tennessee. There was some property involvement. Luckily, there was no contention of the estate. That's where things can really get drawn on if there's
other people, other beneficiaries.
I was going to say
don't
bad
agree,
actors.
yeah.
Sometimes it's not bad actors. Sometimes it's disagreements or people who maybe weren't communicated with ahead of time, so they don't understand if these person's wishes were really this person's wishes.
Yeah.
So that can make things drawn out further. But I've also seen it less, right? Somebody might have a smaller estate, or everything did pass through beneficiaries or with the proper deeds or a trust, and maybe one account was missed. And so there's different things legally that the attorney can say, hey, you can do an informal probate or a small estate affidavit. That makes, in those scenarios, those can be really like 5 to 6 months. There's still steps you have to take, but much shorter time frame.
Is there a sense of emergency? Somebody passes away, because I can just imagine, like the scenario that you're playing in your head. Somebody passes away, and the surviving person, whether that's an adult daughter or a wife or whoever you are,
yes.
Is there a sense of emergency that you should have, or is that just more of like a made up idea in our head?
Yeah. There isn't. And the only reason I hesitate is because the feeling of emergency is real. People feel that. And so I don't want to take away from that feeling. And in a scenario maybe where finances are more scarce, they might think, oh my gosh, we were living off of this account that's only in the person who passed away's name. What am I going to do? How am I going to float myself until I can get access to that? So the feeling of the emergency can be really real for people. And there can be that time where maybe those funds aren't easily accessed until we get the proper documentation and legal proceedings down the road. So more often than not, the folks I'm working with, they have some flexibility, or maybe the account was held jointly, or they can float some of the costs before being reimbursed through the estate. So yes and no. I would say there's a lot of things. More often than not, when people feel the emergent need, I would say there's a lot that we can say, hey, we're going to be able to tackle this in a month. If this electricity bill, or if this, that's not a good example, but if this Comcast bill isn't paid on time, we're going to be able to figure it out, call them, explain what's going on, and have it forgiven. There's more often than not, it's just about the communication and letting them know what was going on.
And you kind of help walk through like plan of attack of like what is the most important to what is maybe the least important?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, great question. So typically when I'm working with someone, what we're doing is we're having a consult where they're telling me what's going on, who they are. Again, I need to make sure that they have the authority to make decisions and share information with me. But from there, hey, this is how I work. This is what I hear you saying you need support with. Here's how that would go together. If they feel like it's a good fit, we move forward. And the very first next step is what I call an intake meeting. And it's pretty thorough. Sometimes we split it up into 2 just because we're detail gathering. We're trying to figure out what accounts existed, what do we not know about that we may need to do searches for to figure out, are there missing assets that we think that there's a life insurance policy, but we don't know. We don't even know where to look.
Right.
I have tools that we can use to search and see if there's a life insurance policy associated with this person's social security number to try to figure out what's there. And so we're creating the directory, again, of what exists, what do we think exists that may not, and then based off of that information, what do we need to do next? So we're getting the what I guess, and then creating the how to tackle all of the what's. Where are these things going to go? What other professionals do we need to bring in? Is there going to be a home that needs, are we going to downsize now or right size? Are we going to be moving? Let's bring in some professionals in that space that are their best fit. So,
and what authority do you have like in this space? Because like you said, you're not an attorney, you're not a financial planner. Like, so what authority do you have?
Yeah, great question. So with my business documents and the agreements that folks sign when they work with me, one part of that is called a third-party authorized agent. And so it is essentially granting me the authority to speak on their behalf, but not to take action. So I'm never going to be calling a financial institution and saying, hey, move this money to this bank account or this.
But you could call and get baseline information.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the goal. I'm trying to take the first several steps off of someone's plate.
Right.
So when it comes to a life insurance policy, for example, I'm calling and saying, hey, I'm notifying you of death. Where can I submit the death certificate? So I'm taking that first step off. Also, I'm working with a family and clients who will need the paperwork to fill out. They're listed as beneficiaries. Can you email or mail the documents to the address you have on file, or can I give you the proper address? That's all generally available information, nothing specific. They're not giving me account balances, information, anything like that. But I'm getting the information that my client needs, notifying them of the death, and taking, and that can take, just knowing how to get to the proper
right. I was going to say, like, and you have to do that times however many things. Like that can be the wear and tear on, like you said, while you're grieving and doing all the things. That can be the wear and tear on a family for sure.
I share that example all the time. For us, when we had to call every institution over and over, yes, my dad died. My dad died. Just repeating that is like, another stab in the heart every time that you have to repeat it. And so for me to be able to take that on for my clients and not have to have them go through that, that alone, even if it's not, I'm not making the decisions for them or taking some of the steps.
It's similar to us. I mean, we have that same thing that we're able to talk about your move with the people involved in your move.
Exactly.
So if you are living in a senior living community, we're able to talk to them on your behalf. Like, this is our plan. This is our anticipated move date. Does that line up with what's happening on your end? You don't have to tell me. You don't have to tell me, oh, we're missing medical paperwork. I don't need to know that. I just need to know, does this line up? Does our plan line up with your plan? Or, an estate liquidator that's coming in, we're out of the property here. We're selling the property here. Like, I don't have to make those decisions. I just need to be able to help, like you said, plan and get the ball rolling.
The logistics.
The logistics. Exactly. Yep. Interesting. So I guess, what would you wish people would know earlier?
So much. I think the biggest thing I wish that people would know is that even just little steps now, while you are cognitively able to, physically able to, taking some little steps to even write an email to the person who's going to serve in this role, making sure you get your estate plan, some sort of estate plan done, can be huge. I'm sure you've talked about the statistic with other professionals, but 2/3 of Americans don't have any sort of will or estate plan. And something, more often than not, is better than nothing. So taking some of those smaller steps, having an estate plan, writing down your wishes in terms of, hey, here's what I would wish to happen. Ideally, a legal authority is drafting that for you, so it's binding and correct and done right. But even saying, hey, just so you know, we're at Thanksgiving dinner. I want you to know that as my executor, when I'm gone, here's where you can find everything. Did you know that? Maybe they didn't. But just giving them the keys to where things are. And not just the jewelry, but hey, the spare keys for the car and the deed for the car, where all these things are. The directory, I tell people, is one of the easier things to fill out because you already know. You know it. I know where my spare keys are. I know where the safe code it. Like, I know where all these things are. If I can write that and share it securely for my example, my brother would be my executor. If my husband and I were both to pass away, he knows where everything is. He has a copy of it. So just trying to make their lives slightly easier and take those little steps to do so, because
and just like you said, password management and accounts that exist, and we laugh, I joke, I probably said it in other podcast episodes that like I own a business and I have a business partner and I have a partner in life. I have a husband, and I'm always like, okay, so if something happens to me, my partner in my business is going to know more and probably be able to manage this because we live in all of our business and of our things. And I'm like, so that's a huge asset to me to be able.
Yes.
So we always joke like, the passwords are in the front, of this and that, and we laugh about that all the time. But it's true that there are certain things that, like, same thing. Like, I'm sure there would be so many things that I would know inherently to help her spouse.
Yes.
And so having that third person or third party, if that's someone like you, but tell people what it is and how it is, because well, and then again, we've had people talk about wills and trust and the difference between wills and trust and probate and all the things, but something's better than nothing.
Yes.
And make sure that you communicate with people, like you said, what your plan is, and update it frequently.
Yes.
Because I think the last time we did an official will was when my kids were little.
Yes.
Well, they're, a freshman in high school and 7th grader right now. Yep. Like, at what point do you revamp that? Because who is going to take care of them now is very different than how we would have looked at that when they were little.
Absolutely.
And so how does that look in doing it, refreshing it?
Yeah. Yeah, I just like an attorney would say that I think most attorneys say, hey, after we draft your documents, once a year, you should be at least considering, have there been any major life events? Has your child turned 18 and now they're their own legal adult who should really have their own really basic documents, but something that would grant you as a parent or someone else trusted in their life to make decisions if they weren't able to, like even if they haven't passed, if they were in a car accident. So major life events, a child has aged, maybe there's a new property or new asset that needs to be considered. Just like an attorney, I would say once a year. You're creating this directory, and again, the directory I'm talking about could be as simple as an Excel sheet or a piece of paper with nothing identifying. It doesn't have to have the account numbers, but just, I have an account at Wells Fargo. My mortgage is with Truist. Like, whatever it needs to be, listing those out can be such a roadmap. And then just annually being like, is my mortgage still there? Did I sell this house?
Well, I mean, just think about, there's all these things I've seen online too, where like, account managers of like finding accounts you didn't even know you had, subscriptions you didn't even remember because it's just on autopilot. Exactly. Like, how many things in our life and the more technology that we get, the more autopilot we're getting.
Yes.
Your Apple ID for your watch to your phone to, we had a digital organizer come on, the Digital Wrangler. I don't know if you know her. I know, I love her. But, she talks about like sharing the passwords to your phone, like so that people can access your photos and videos and things. Like, if you don't think about that, if people are very secure or maybe just aren't sharing that information just because they're not, how does that work? And that stuff all goes away. Apple then owns your phone, that then owns your pictures and all the things. So it's amazing to me. And just thinking through, like we're saying, because your life changes. And that's why this podcast exists, is we are dealing with people who are transitioning, no matter what that space may look like. You're transitioning. You're transitioning from, maybe you're an empty nester. Your kids are now out of the house. What does that look like? Or you're transitioning to being that adult daughter who is now a caretaker to your parents, and you don't know. And I think people tell us all the time, I didn't know your service existed, probably until too late. And I think that's the same thing for you, is that people don't have to go through death and loss and all of the management of death and loss on their own.
Exactly. It's so true. And I think, yes, if you asked earlier, what do I wish people knew? And it's just that there is support. If you take advantage of it and know about it ahead of time and dive into it, great. If you don't, we're still here. We're still going to support you. We're still going to make sure you're not feeling alone through this, just like I know you guys do.
Yeah.
And so, I'm grateful to be here with you today, because just the awareness about this space and that after loss services as kind of that concierge project management support exists is a huge goal of mine, just to let people know that it is there. Because just like for my own personal example, I wished it had been, and I really don't think it was. Maybe it was out there and I couldn't find it, but I just want people to know they don't have to be alone, and there's support in so many ways.
So for people who are going to wonder, because it's always the question we get all the time too, is like, is there a typical cost for these type of services? Is it kind of a la carte, or do you have packages? What does that look like?
Great question. So I have gone a little bit back and forth, but right now I do packages that are based on hours. And so I typically, on an after loss space, I'm working with a family for at least about 10 hours, I would say, on average. Sometimes it is just slightly less than that. Often it is more than that. But that's...
I was going to say 10 hours didn't seem like enough, but
no,
on a maybe basic level.
On a very basic level, like somebody's got an estate
just getting
plan.
started.
We're just getting started. And that's on the after loss. Like, hey, they had a well-funded trust. Their beneficiaries were set up. There's just a few things that need buttoned up, tied up. And we just don't feel like we want to handle it. Great. I can probably get most of that done in about 10 hours. And so I charge an hourly rate based off of that. I work with families too if we need to split payments. I know that this can be a trying time for folks. So
or they're waiting for the funds to get freed up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that often takes a while. So my funds can be reimbursed by the estate. I do require them up front. So I've had executors where they'll pay me, but later get reimbursed for my expenses through the estate.
Interesting. Yeah.
Which is similar of a lot of professionals in
Yeah.
this space.
Yeah. Well, and we were talking about just like the human element of what we do. Like, I love that you use the word concierge because that's what we use as well. We like the word white glove. Because it signals something different.
Yes.
So how would you say this is different? Or maybe we kind of touched on that too, but like, what are give me maybe an example of a story where the human element changed the experience.
Yes. Yeah. So we touched on this a little bit before, but I think a great example, I'll share it again. I'm working with a family right now. Dad passed away a week ago. I was fortunate enough to meet him actually before he passed. We had met in December and had hoped that we could get some things organized. He had a diagnosis. Things sped up quicker, of course, than we expected them to. So I was aware of the scenario, had been able to meet this lovely human, and kind of gotten to know the family a little bit before this all started. And now, in sitting with them and working through, okay, here's what we know we could have done. Here's what we know is the case for these specific businesses. The person had businesses and property and different accounts. Let's make this plan of attack, if you will. But when I'm sitting there in person or even over Zoom with someone, whether I've gotten to know them or not, I think when you're working with me or an after-loss professional, you're getting that human-enabled empathy to say, I can tell you're feeling a little overwhelmed right now. Do you want to take a break? Do you want to pause for 5 and we can come back? You need a sip of water? You're not going to get that.
Well, you said something earlier that I love the question, and I've heard it from several professionals, and we probably need to incorporate it a bit more as what is keeping you up at night?
Yes.
Because I think that digs to the soul of when you're going through a transition or trauma or whatever. Sometimes, like you said, what they're worried about is something that you could put to bed really quickly.
Yes.
And also like, okay, I may be really worried about that, but that's what they're worried about.
Exactly.
So let's solve that so that they don't have to worry about that anymore.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
often it's, to your point, it's not the most maybe
No.
the truly most pressing thing.
Yeah.
I actually did steal that question from somebody who supported another client, one of my very first clients. It was a banker, and my client was nervous. They had a HELOC on their home, and they also had some investment accounts, and they said, I know that it's probably more advantageous for me to keep the HELOC, to keep this loan, even though it was at a higher rate, and just keep my stocks growing. But I hate debt. I'm so stressed out about having this debt on this HELOC, having it be different every month. I'm so stressed. And the banker, even though it wasn't in his best interest because managing the stocks was better for him, he said, what's this? He had asked the question. This was her response to what she was losing sleep over. And he goes, then let's pay it off. You have the funds. She was fortunate to have the funds. Let's pay it off. There's nothing more important than finding that peace for you, especially right now.
Yeah.
If this is it, let's do it. And long term, I think it's going to balance okay for this person. But in the moment he asked that question, it was so profound, so simple and so profound.
Yeah.
I've tried to incorporate it in everything I do because you can see, even just asking the question, the person's thinking and they go, physically, you can see them say it out loud and think to themselves, I'm not alone in this. They're going to help me solve this.
Or the thing that people, when they're having to right size and they're having to, in their mind, get rid of something, usually there's something or some group of things that is keeping them up at night that they're like, so if we can find a home for it, if we can find a value reimbursement solution for it, if we can incorporate it into the home plan, whatever it is, if you can figure out what's the roadblock that is making this so difficult, and go, no big deal. Like, I just, and that maybe the family dynamics don't allow them to agree. Mom wants to take the china cabinet or the curio, and that the adult son thinks it's so dumb. Why are we taking all the knickknacks and the decorative things? But if that is what is the roadblock, let's take it.
Yes.
I worked with a family, actually that it was adult son, bless them. I'm going to have a son. So I'm like, please, Lord, have a great daughter-in-law. I also have a daughter, firstborn. So Lord help us all there too. But I think sometimes there's like that. So I went into her home, and her home was very, very covered in beautiful things. Not my style, not his style, very evidently.
Yes.
But he grew up with that, right? So there is fake, foliage, as we call it, permanent botanicals.
Yes.
Everywhere, and stuff on the walls, and collages, and art, and da-da-da-da. I went in there, and he, I didn't know them very well, so I was trying to build rapport pretty quickly. And I walked in and I said, okay, well, what are we taking? Any, the chair and the table and the lamp and very basic. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting chatting with her, and the more I'm chatting with her and looking around, I'm like, we can't just take basic. We can't. She will hate it.
This is not a basic abode.
I was like, she's not going to like it. We've got to fill the walls. We've got to fill the space. Like, it has to feel tactfully right-sized. Mm. And so I said, can I take this? And he was like, I mean, if you want to. And I'm like, okay. And then so we were chatting, and she has Christmas up year round. And I said, well, then we're taking Christmas year round, because it was right after Christmas. I'm like, take the Christmas village. Do I have a place for it? No, we'll figure it out.
Yes.
And what I loved about that move is that it didn't look bare. Yeah. It probably to some people would have looked a little like tactfully cluttered, but it was the way that she liked it. She wanted her beautiful things. And it was funny because she came in and she was so happy on the reveal, but we didn't take one of the curio cabinets that the son had said no. So then we went round and round and round about that, and that's all she could think about. And it took this beautiful experience. I was like, all of it to say, like, we do a good job, and then we miss the one thing, like, you got to know what the one thing is, because that will help them put some closure on it.
Yeah. And identifying those one things, whether it's a physical thing or otherwise,
or the business thing, or the one account, or the HELOC that's really just like, I don't want debt, I don't want this, I don't want that. Like, what is keeping them up at night that they're worried about?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think being able to ask that as somebody who's done it, in your case with the moving, in my case with the organization, is able to say, okay, we can do that, and we can still do the rest of it too.
Yeah.
We can still make sure that we right-size the things that need to be right-sized.
Well, and I think that's the other thing is, like, when you're in a family dynamic, or maybe there's not even family, maybe there's other, executors or whatever involved, we become like the middleman. So, like, you can't be mad at me because I'm not related to this at all. I'm not invested in this at all, other than to make you happy as a customer.
Yes.
And I think that's the other piece of it, is like that adult son, like, what a gift he gave to his mom to spend the time and do the thing. Yeah. It's just, he was like, we don't need any of this. Well, of course you don't need it.
Yes.
But she wants it. And so how do we help bridge that gap and help them be successful? So she, she doesn't feel forced to be there, and then it's against her will, and it doesn't look beautiful, and, put all the tchotchkes up, hang the things, do the things, if that's what's going to make it right.
Well, that's what makes her space and makes her as an individual. Sometimes our things are respective of who we are, of where we've been, of our experiences. So I'm
sure you've had those experiences too, where you're working with family and you've got, this person with this opinion and this person with this opinion, and then you can come in and say, okay, but priorities are X, Y, Z. So then it no longer becomes this like tug and pull. It can be a little bit more, methodical, I guess.
Methodical, yeah. There's definitely some, I can tell you all the things I'm not, right? But there's also some things that I'm not a mediator.
But you are,
there are definitely some family dynamic and handling those. Sometimes there's families that don't speak to each other, and I am communicating on behalf of the executor to the other family members about what's going on. Obviously, if that gets to a certain point, we're bringing in other professional help. But I have a client right now where one sibling's the executor and only speaks with one other sibling, doesn't speak with two. So just handling the communication, maintaining that professionalism.
It's worth every dollar.
It's just, and that's
what and especially like you said, in a time of grief and trauma, that's the last thing you want to do, is to fight with the sister you've been fighting with for 2 decades.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't come with the baggage. I hope to just here's
diffuse
what's going on. Here's hey, I need this from you.
Yeah.
How does everybody feel about this?
Yeah. Well, and there's loaded things. I mean, for me to hear the story about, a picture or an album or a piece of art, for me, it's the first time I've heard the story. And I don't know, the adult daughter may be annoyed because that was on a specific thing and caused a triggering memory about this.
Yes.
So for her, she doesn't want to hear about that anymore. But for me, it's the first time I'm hearing it. So it allows them to have that closure and allows them, because there's so much research that says once we tell the story, we can let it go.
Yeah.
If you're holding on to the story, sometimes you won't let it go. And so allowing that space without having to burden whoever is struggling in that space, because it's hard. Families, as I'm sure you inherently know, families are complicated, and you add death and dying, or you add a transition or a big life change, and it's all
elevated,
all up for grabs at that point.
Absolutely.
Okay, the last question I always like to ask people is the name of our podcast is the Making Space for podcast. So what do you feel, using services like yours or working with people like yourself, what does that help create space for people?
It feels a little basic to say, but I think when somebody's doing either legacy organization or after loss services, you're making space for peace of mind. Because, and I'm sure you could probably put that on most things, but when you are taking off these tasks that we all inherently think about, even if it's subconscious of, oh, I really should do this, or I really should make an estate plan, I really should tell someone else where this is. It's those little thoughts that maybe don't feel overwhelming the day to day, but they're always there. Like maybe every day or every week or every month, you're thinking, oh, I should do this. And if we just do it, on the legacy side, we're taking off this thing that might not feel big, but when you think about it that frequently, it can really build up to something bigger.
Yeah.
And on the after loss side, I tell people it's peace of mind, because you're likely being thrown into a role that maybe you've never served before. Most people aren't an executor more than once, maybe twice in their lifetime. And you don't have training for it. You probably have a whole lot of other things going on. Maybe you run your own business, or you have a job or kids or other things that your normal day-to-day is already full.
Right.
So by bringing on somebody like me, you're getting that peace of mind of knowing I'm not in this alone. I still have to do things, but I'm going to get guidance, support, and coaching throughout the way to not be alone in doing it.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well, you're in a very sacred space. So keep up the good work, and love to collaborate and continue our relationship. But thanks so much for coming and sharing. So if you're in the Denver metro area, or it looks like not even, after loss, if you're looking for that, I'll put all of her information in our podcast so you can connect with her as you need her. All right. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Paige.
That wraps up another inspiring episode of the Making Space for podcast. A huge thank you to our incredible guest and to you, our cherished listeners. Your journey to intentional living begins with each small step, and we're honored to be a part of it. Before we part ways, a friendly reminder: if you're embarking on a move or seeking expert guidance in downsizing, remember, a move handled with care here in Denver. With over 15 years of experience in senior and specialty move management, we're here to transform your transition into a seamless, stress-free experience. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss an episode, and visit us on social media or at amovehandledwithcare.com for more inspiration and resources. Until next time, stay inspired, stay intentional, and keep making space for what matters most.